Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, TJ Mabarty. We are running this late night special for the podcast. Tonight we are going to be talking about the Super Bowl. I've sort of been putting off making my official pick as we have counted down the days until the official matchup. So I'm going to be giving my official picks then in the second segment, and from there on out, we're going to be talking about some basketball in the NBA. The trade deadline just concluded yesterday while we were actually live on the show. So since then, I've had some time to go over these trades more in depth. And we're going to be talking about the winners and losers from the deadline, talking about a couple of the main prominent teams in the Lakers and Warriors that decided to stay put. And then finally, I'm going to be giving my power rankings post-trade deadline at the end of the show. Before we get into everything, just a reminder to like and follow. And without further ado, getting into this first segment here and talking about my predictions for Super Bowl 58. As of right now, the 49ers are 1.5 point favorites over the Chiefs. This is at least a number given by ESPN Bet. I've sort of talked about it earlier in the week, the fact that I was surprised to see that the 49ers were actually favored in this one, and specifically that all of these sports books would give the public another chance to bet on Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs as an underdog. Mahomes is now 10-3 as his career as an underdog, and I think that it's really interesting if you try and sort of look into the politics of it is probably the wrong word, but the way that sort of these sports books typically measure in public bets. It felt like last week there was an opportunity where a lot of people were sort of dubious of the Chiefs team, and for fair reason, based off of sort of their lack of truly proving themselves up to that point. I mean, obviously, yes, it's Mahomes, it's Andy Reid, it's all of the main guys that have been a part of this Super Bowl core for a while now, but this season, they just did not look the same, and I think that for a large part of that, and the fact that the Baltimore Ravens at the time were seen to be such a good team, they seemed so complete, and now the public is getting another chance to bet on Mahomes. It almost feels too easy, but I mean, I think in this one, for me personally, I'll just get ahead of it right now. I'm going to have the Chiefs winning this one a little bit reluctantly. I like the 49ers. I think that it sort of means more for the Niners for a lot of people on that sideline between Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy. And I like Christian McCaffrey a lot too. All of these guys sort of getting their first ring. I like the first ring over the dynasty. I don't think that there are too many people in the country that really love the dynasty all that much necessarily. If we've learned anything from sort of the history of sports fandom, it's that we usually like parody and we hate the things that are so dominant. And I don't hate the Chiefs by any mean. I definitely feel like, at least as of recent years, I have been sort of more on the side of appreciating greatness. And Patrick Mahomes, I mean, the stuff that he does is actually so incredible, and I feel like it would be such a waste to watch everything that he does out there on the field week in, week out, and get upset about it just because of how good they are. I think that that's sort of, I mean, it just goes to, Kenneth and I talked about it on his football podcast the other day. Just, it sort of goes to society and people. We like to get mad about things really that are just, I don't know, too prominent, too dominant, and that are just great. And it makes no sense to me. Patrick Mahomes, watching him not to sound dramatic or anything, but it honestly is a pleasure at sometimes the way that he just makes these throws. And listen, I firmly stand by, this is a little bit of a tangent. It's not like what he does has never been seen before. Elements of every part of his game have been replicated in some point in time. I still strongly stand by the fact that Matthew Stafford just got nowhere near the credit he deserved for the different arm angles that he throws with. Those years in Detroit, I remember being a little kid and being fascinated at those sidearm throws. I'm like, how does he do that? And, it was on a losing Detroit team that had very little flash. And for that reason, and for, kind of fair reason, it wasn't given necessarily all that much attention. But that combined with the mobility that he has, some of the no-look stuff, I mean, it's all flashy, but it's all sort of seamlessly threaded together to take all these different elements that we've seen from different quarterbacks in the past and put them together to this sort of new breed of quarterback. And, I think that he's changed almost the course of how teams want to draft their quarterbacks. They need to be these improvisers and need to be elite playmakers. And it goes back to this whole game manager versus playmaker debate. And I'm supposed to be talking about Super Bowl predictions itself here, more so than just random sort of Mahomes and Chiefs propaganda almost, because that's not something I would ever really want to be a part of. But I guess all of this just to be said that I don't think I can go against Mahomes again. Now, does this feel a little trap liney? The fact that the Chiefs are underdogs again? A little bit, yeah. But I just think that this is going to be a close game one way or another. I think that, both of these teams are definitely susceptible to the run game. And I think that there are two great rushing offenses. Now, it was announced that Joe Thuney, the Chiefs All-Pro guard, he has been ruled out for Sunday, but it wasn't a massive factor in the Baltimore game. It made somewhat of a difference maybe in that second half when they weren't getting as much push up front, but all in all, that offense is going to, for the most part, live and die by Mahomes. Now, you can go back to those championship games and sort of look at things a little bit of a, you can look at it in different lights where if the 49ers allow the Chiefs to run away with the game early and they want to try and let themselves back into the game like that, you're not going to have some of the mistakes from the Chiefs offense that we saw, such as the Jahmyr Gibbs fumble. And I think that the defense on the other end is far more elite than we saw with the Detroit group, and that was sort of a thing that surrounded the Detroit Lions for a while this year, is just sort of the lack of difference makers. And they definitely, I like the Lions core, I'm not going to dig into them too much right now, but that secondary was very much vulnerable, and we sort of saw why. The Vildor pass that went off of his face mask into Brandon Ayuk's hands, and late in that game, they weren't really shutting down anything for them once the 49ers started feeding Debo, and once they had an opportunity to play the script that they wanted and sort of get into the real Shanahan offense, it was all available to them. There's way more talent on this defensive side with the Chiefs. And another thing that Kenneth and I talked about on the football podcast was the fact that I feel like a lot of people are sort of chalking this up as the 49ers are all in all the better team than the Chiefs. It's just that the Chiefs have Mahomes. And I feel like the betting line would sort of indicate that as well. But I went through the positional matchups earlier this week, and I actually had the Chiefs 6-4 in terms of positional groups that they had the advantage at. Now, there were some significant gaps, like if you look at, obviously, the receiving core, and if the Chiefs are to sort of fall flat, I think that that could be a massive part of this. But because you look at what the 49ers are going to try and do from a defensive scheme standpoint, they are going to want to get Patrick Mahomes off of his first read, off of sort of his spot in the pocket, and put pressure on him. They have the guys up front to do so. They have maybe the four, if you're just going on paper, at least talent wise, probably the four best down linemen that are in the NFL. They've been, great. Well, they've been good. Obviously, we know how good of players they are. They've been underwhelming, though, is part of the issue. Now, I have no doubts about Nick Bosa. I think that Javon Hargrave has been a very solid player for them as well. They went and they spent the big bucks on him. And I'm curious for him specifically, being one of the interior guys, because we look at this matchup, and I think that he's going to have to play a big role on the inside with the run game. We obviously know how good the linebackers behind that front four are between Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, but you're going to need to have some disruptors up front. And the fact that Joe Thuney isn't going to be playing, and we saw last week the replacement be able to hold his own for a lot of the game, and the Ravens defense obviously is incredibly talented, so it's not like there's this massive spike in terms of competition, but I think that it's going to sort of come down to the line of scrimmage in a lot of ways. Like I mentioned, both of these run defenses, the Chiefs for a lot of the regular season, and the 49ers specifically since they've gotten to the playoffs, stopping the run has been a little bit of an issue for them. We saw the Packers get going on them when, and a Packers team that was sort of peaking at the right time, and Aaron Jones is a great running back, but, it's a little bit of a pride thing to some degree, this Packers team that was so young, and yeah, they were peaking at the right time, but, it almost felt like they should have just been more so excited to be there, and again, there's always debates about whether or not the bye week is actually helpful or not in terms of the preparation and the excitement level. There's a little bit of a tune-up game argument that you can make, but this was a 7-seeded Packers team, and they came out and they ran it down their throats. On the other hand here with the Chiefs defense, you're going up against the best running back in the NFL with Christian McCaffrey. So you get Willie Gay back from injury, which is definitely helpful. Again, I think that the edge goes to the 49ers as far as that positional group, but they don't really have, Chris Jones is a monster. He's one of the best pass rushing interior linemen that we've seen in the NFL in years. Can he step up in that run game? Can the other guys step up? I really like George Karlaftis off the edge for them, especially with a right tackle in McKivitz for the 49ers that's been struggling a little bit as of late and in the playoffs. So, it's definitely possible to get that push up front, but they're not quite as strong now. I know that the Niners scheme-wise sort of look to press the issue a little bit more, and you're going up against a quarterback in Patrick Mahomes where you have to do so. Can these receivers for the Chiefs make plays on the fly? Like we've seen Patrick Mahomes always be able to find Travis Kelce sort of in these semi-improvised second routes after the initial play breaks down. Do you have faith in the rest of the group to sort of make the big play when necessary? Because there's going to be chances when these plays break down, if their run game is strong going into the play action game, can you win those one-on-one coverages against a secondary in the 49ers that can sort of let up big plays at times, relying on a lot of youth talent on that back end and not necessarily quite as high of a level as the Chiefs' youth talent, and really without any bona fide stars, because we talked about earlier, they lost Hufanga, their all-pro safety, earlier this year, and now they've just sort of pieced the rest of the guys together well enough to get to this point, but it's a whole different level when you're playing Patrick Mahomes, and he knows how to take advantage of different mismatches. There aren't really a ton of mismatches when it comes to these Chiefs receivers, but at least schematically, now that he's learned to understand literally the game of football better over these first 6 seasons of him being a starter, and even that year that he sat behind Alex Smith as well, he was a little bit of a late bloomer when it came to the mental side of the game. Now that he's getting there, he's definitely going to be looking for certain looks in the secondary to take advantage of. So I'm going with the Chiefs. Now, I think that just between Mahomes, I don't want to be wrong on him really 2 weeks in a row in the postseason. It might just have to be a rule where you can't bet against him. And if they go out and they win this week, I think that there's pretty much a chance that we're going to have to just imply a rule never to bet against him, and especially not as an underdog. If they win this game, I can't see them being the underdog anytime soon in a postseason game. But that is my official prediction. I'm taking the Chiefs in this game. Again, a little bit reluctantly, but it is what it is. I don't make the rules. So we are going to be taking our first break with that. When we come back on the other side, we are going to be getting into some NBA as the trade deadline wrapped up yesterday. We're going to start with some winners and losers from the deadline. So stick with us. We will be right back.